Welcome back, everybody. We've got three in the books already, and this is four. And I think that even though the first three were probably the most important to for survival, this is going to be, I think, a little bit more pertinent to just our everyday activity, at our jobs and family members and our relationships as well. So, what we covered. So obviously, this is de-escalation and conflict avoidance, like Jay mentioned, but and welcome everybody to the second one. If I didn't say that, however, the first one we went over de-escalation as far as de-escalating a possible violent attack, right? What we're going to dive into today is, some of the ways that the tips and tricks that we have in order to de-escalate um, something that is an argument, possibly a potential argument that we're trying to kind of lower in a sense that not only ourselves but that individual, so we can then help them in a sense and serve them, and also, as always, maintain our safety. So, speaking on that, let's keep something in mind before we start to dive into this. At any time that we are in some type of a conflict. I mean, obviously, one of the reasons that we're starting to become elevated, our heart rate starts to increase, blood pressure is going up, our breathing starts to become shallow, we start to get that anxiety and that tense feeling. That's our body telling us that, this is something that could potentially turn into something dangerous. We don't have to just think that. Our body's already telling us. We naturally start to pick up on those cues. So, with all that being said, we have to understand that no matter what, maintaining that number one objective at the forefront is always key. And that number one objective should be survival. That number one objective, my mission every single day, is to get through this day, to be able to make it back to those people that we love and that love us, right? So, keep this in mind that at any time, if this were to be escalated into a situation to now it's hands on, everything's out the window. Almost everything that we were saying we were doing is out the window, and it goes back to survival, and it goes back to decreasing that space to take away some of that danger from that individual and give us a little bit more of an advantage to then create the space. And you'll learn a lot more about that, as Jamie said, in the two self-defense sessions. However, it's just getting out and surviving. And if you have any more questions on that, they'll be answered obviously when we do self-defense, but throw them out there as well, because we did cover a lot of that as well in personal safety threat awareness, our first two sessions, and touched on a little bit our last session as well. And with questions being in mind, we ended a little bit not late, but not enough time to field a lot of those questions. We did, maybe three or four. So today's session, I'm going to have Jamie, give me the 10 or 15 minute mark. But today I'd like to still keep a little bit more time at the end, because I know you guys have some questions that are circulating. And just keep this in mind also, that if you're thinking of a question but you're not asking, there's somebody else that's probably thinking the same thing. So ask for them. So your questions, comments, situations that possibly you've been in, experiences, we're going to save that for the end, and obviously jump in at any time throughout. But that engagement is what helps us learn. So let's get back on track here. Let's do this. So obviously, let's paint this scenario. For one reason or another, it could be the scenario that I cut somebody off and now they're starting to approach me. They're angry. We have something that has to do under the umbrella of customer service. We're in some type of an argument or high debate with somebody that we have a relationship with, or a family member. What are some things, some tips and tricks that we can do, not to just de-escalate them, but also de-escalate ourselves, because we start to feel that tension, right? Everybody really strives to have that cool, calm mentality, right? When somebody, you see those people, you see it all the time on like Instagram and social media, to where they're like, if I could just maintain my mentality and stay calm, then, things are going to end up being a lot better. But man, that's really difficult to do. There's all these quotes and statements about it. However, I'm going to give you a couple of different ways that you could actually start to practice that. And I guarantee you, when you really start to dive into this and think about it and the why behind it, it's going to help. and it's proven. It's evidence-based practice through, even hostage negotiation and things like that. However, the one thing that we have to completely understand is communication is the key. And communication, guys, just to throw this out there to you, they say 7% of communication is us actually talking. So think about that. 93%, and we'll say 7 to 10. So 90 to 95 or even 5%. 90% around there is everything else that surrounds it. So what does that include? That includes body language, our interpersonal communication skills, such as our tone, our attitude. And one key thing that we're going to be talking about quite a bit is putting things into perspective over perception, our own perception, right? But let's start physically. We talked about nonviolent postures. The scenario is an individual is now approaching us. You can clearly see that they're angry, and just a few tips on that is their face will be different. It will look different. It's either going to be flushed or it will be pale. And you will see maybe a clenched jaw, maybe those eyebrows clenched. So you're going to be able to see just even in their facial region, or even how they're acting fidgety, high stress. Everybody knows what that looks like because we all do it, right? So we clearly now have pointed that out that this person is not happy. They're unhappy. They're angry. Let's talk about body language. Our nonviolent postures we talked about in the past three sessions, which are hand on chin, arms folded, defensive posture. I'm sorry, interview posture, and then defensive posture. And two of those, some right now might be thinking, man, but I've always been taught if my arms are closed, whether it's hand on chin or my arms are folded or crossed, that's showing that I'm closed off, and that is true. It does give you kind of that perception that you are closed off to whatever they're saying, but it sounds really crazy. But one of the tiny little tips to make them feel that now you are receiving their information is, instead of leaning back like this, actually lean forward just slightly. Not leaning over, but just that slight leaning in, like you're trying to hear, you're trying to understand. What that does is that says, hey, they're receiving my information, right? And that's going to be huge, because the number one thing out of any type of de-escalation or negotiation is that person. And most of you guys, if I threw this question out there, you'd answer it right away. What's the one thing that they feel that they need right now? Does anybody know the answer to that? To be heard. Yeah, to be heard, and take it one step further, to be validated. They want their issue and they want themselves to be validated. They want to feel valid in this. Like, this is a real problem to me. And I want you to feel that this is valid. I'm not just, somebody that's, throwing something out there willy-nilly, right? So how do we make them feel validated? Well, just that tiny little lean in, trying to, listen to what they're saying, that's part of that validation. Now let's talk about just those two in particular, the hand on chin and the arms folded. There's something else that does, which creates safety for us that we talked about. That creates a barrier in between us, right? Which can be good and bad with interpersonal communication skills. However, that barrier obviously is between us. It sends that perception to them that now it's going to be harder for them to reach. However, I could go to defensive immediately from that. We learned that in our first couple of sessions. However, the other two now is an interview posture, just having my hands somewhat folded in front of me. I still have them above my waist and in front of me there, so I can react. However, what that does, guys, is when I'm actually putting my hands up and out in a defensive posture, like we talked previously, everybody else sees that. Well, so does that person. That person says, okay, well, wait, I may now be overstepping my boundaries, right? And obviously, it helps us protect our computer, like we talked about on Tuesday. But just having those hands now could easily start to make them feel like they're being heard. For instance, if I take my hands from an interview posture, or even somewhat defensive, or an interview posture that's kind of inconspicuous, right? And I just open these palms this way. If you go to church, and depending on what denomination you are, a lot of times This means receive, right? I'm receiving the message. So, just understanding body language. If I'm talking this way, in a sense, it presents that perception once again that I'm receiving your message. So just keep that in mind as well. But now let's talk about positioning, right? We talked last time on Tuesday about those four body positions. If I'm directly in front of you, we're on equal playing ground. Meaning, if I end up getting attacked, well, now we're on equal playing ground. I'm going to try, if I can, to get to your side. Keep this in mind. I'm going to get to your side, either side, or the rear, which then gives me the best vantage point. But you're not going to try to de-escalate anybody from the rear, right? What I am going to do, though, is I can start to move to their side. Just picture this, because I know we're on a Zoom call right now, but if you just can picture, my hands are up in front of me and I start moving to their side in a sense. I do two things. Number one, I'm gaining a better vantage point physically if something were to happen, which, like we said, is possible but not probable. But the other thing that shows is they're on my team. I'm on your team. I'm here listening. I'm really trying to understand what's going on. These are just the physical things that we could do, right? Now, understanding also that once I get close, like we talked Tuesday, now I'm within a personal space, right? So that awareness flag has to go up. And that's another reason that my hands are free and open. But that's just a few tips on body language. But the next thing, and getting a little bit even more important now, is what are we saying and how are we communicating, right? Tone is huge. For instance, tone and attitude. If all of you that are on here now, if I said the two exact same things but different ways, you guys can see the difference in tone. If I said to you, "Why are you guys here today?" You'd answer the question, say you're here to learn about de-escalation, conflict avoidance, and sharpen your skills that you already have, right? But if I said, "Why are you here today?" Well, that's a little bit different, right? You guys can see the tone, see the attitude. I mean, that's pretty easy to see. But guys, what happens is once we start to escalate, and physiologically, a lot of times we can't help that. Uh, that tone and that attitude starts to really increase as well in a negative way, right? So we have to be cognizant of that. That now, if I'm speaking with somebody or if I'm listening to them, a lot of it comes from that tone on what they're going to say next or how they're going to perceive that. So tone and attitude is huge. But let's just take a little side avenue. All this sounds easy. All this sounds easy, and we could talk about it all day long. We're relaxed. We're behind our computer screen, our laptop screens, and it sounds like it's easy to do. But because of those things that are happening to us, those sympathetic nervous system effects, physiologically, it makes it difficult. Think right now when your last argument that you had, was it easy to de-escalate yourself until after, right? And then you thought, man, I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have done this, or I really should have saw their side on this, or maybe I was a little bit too harsh, whatever. Well, we don't want to get to that guilt and that regret portion of it, right? And for this kind of a situation, especially with a stranger, that could really escalate into a dangerous situation. However, what I do want to do is understand what's happening to me physiologically. It's fight, flight, or freeze. That's exactly what's happening to your body. There's a reason that they say that the best two motivators are fear and anger. That's because you are now dead set ahead and you are mission oriented, right? So if I understand that my heart rate is naturally going to increase, that my breathing will become shallow, my large intestines will start to shut down or pause to conserve energy and blood. My blood's going to rush from my extremities and go to my heart and lungs because that's what's important to protect to survive, right? I may start to shake. I may start to feel sick to my stomach. I may have short-term hearing loss, short-term memory loss, and tunnel vision. All those things are signs of this. And you could feel that happening when you're in this type of debate or argument. So one of the best ways that you can start to dissipate that a little bit is simply breathing. Well, how do we breathe during an argument in a sense? And I can show you a couple of different ways. First of all, I have to understand if I breathe in, that air is coming into my lungs. That air is filled with oxygen. Oxygen gets to my blood. Blood goes to my brain. And also my heart rate starts to decrease. I start to see a little bit clearer. Also, just doing a simple pause, taking that breath in, letting it out, that does a couple of things as well. First of all, I'm getting oxygen, and that's starting to help dissipate. Second, it's actually pausing so I can start to maybe cycle what they're saying. And the other thing it does is it shows them when you give that just little breath that's saying, hey, I'm taking this in, I'm pausing, I'm listening. Once again, they start to feel validated. Now, there's a difference in breath if I'm, this way, but obviously, if you just take that pause, take that breath in, it's going to do both of us good in that argument. So now let's talk about, I talked a few little tips on this, but let's talk about now one of the most important things, right? Perspective over perception. If somebody comes in and they're just pissed off, and you can clearly see they are mission oriented, they are task oriented, they want whatever happened rectified, and they're in your mind you're thinking there's no talking to this person. Well, first of all, my safety is always paramount. However, if I could just start to train myself into thinking, even if somebody cuts me off in traffic, if I could start thinking to myself, I need to put this into perspective and possibly what they're feeling or what they're going through over my own perception of they're just pissed and they're not going to hear it. If I start thinking things like, if I was in their shoes and this happened to me, I'd be pretty upset too. Or maybe that person just cut me off, is rushing to the hospital. Or maybe, whatever's going on, I just don't know what's happening in their life. And if I can start in some way to put that into perspective and also remember that if they don't know me personally, don't take it personal. Somebody that cuts me off that doesn't know me, they're not doing it because they don't like me. They're doing it for their own purpose. So if I could sit there and think, man, why would I take that personal if they're not doing it to me personally and maliciously, right? That's helping to put that situation and that person now into perspective over my own perception. So they say perception is reality. And I do believe that the majority of that is true. But if we could couple that with now still trying to see their side of things, that's going to help us de-escalate that situation. Understanding all of that now and understanding that if this person now is hearing me, which is going to be really difficult, by the way, because they're typically the ones talking. If I can understand that they feel that same way, and I'm saying, okay, I'm trying to listen, but they're just yelling or they're just upset. Take that pause that we talked about and wait, watch, and then respond, but respond with paraphrasing. And I'm sure everybody's heard this. If somebody comes in and they're completely angry, paraphrase it. Pause, take that breath. So, okay, so what let me try to get to the bottom of this. What you're saying is you're telling me that this person did this person did this, or you need to speak with this person. So let me help you with this. Let me figure this out just so I have a better understanding. So if you put yourself once again on their team, even though it's hard sometimes, it's difficult because maybe up here they're completely inaccurate. They're offline with this, they're off base with this, but you could at least try to see at least where they're coming from. It will help you understand. It's going to help you calm down and pause. Which, by the way, let's talk about calm down. If anybody has any question about, Jamie knows really well about this. If somebody's upset, those two words, man, they carry a lot of weight. Just calm down. Jane, do you have anything to say on that? No, she's silent. So just calming
I keep
down.
my mouth shut right now about this.
Just to give you guys a little backstory, Jamie and I, we're not husband and wife, and we grew up together. We're first cousins, and we're 3 weeks apart in age, but so we bicker more like brother and sister and husband and wife than probably anybody in the world. But we were in a we'll call it a debate about some things going on several weeks ago, a couple months ago, and Jamie looked at me and she said to me, calm down. And she started to laugh. And on the inside, I felt like, oh, but then I kind of caught it. And then afterwards, I've laughed about it ever since. So just don't say the words calm down. We'll just keep it at that. But what are some words you can say? You say their words. You actually paraphrase. And one thing and by the way, Jamie's great at this also. One thing that you can say just to put them on that level in a sense is, how can I help you? What can I do to make this easier for you? Once again, that's validating what their issue is, and once again, that's getting on their team. But that validation is going to be huge. So before we go into a few other things, guys, what are some comments or questions that you guys may have before I start to forget that you may have questions or situations, even situations that maybe kind of left you a little perplexed. Anybody? Nothing. All right. Well, if you think
Oh,
of something,
oh,
then shoot it out there for us.
I
What's that,
have
Jay?
a question just based on something that I
Yeah.
had seen recently online. Um, if somebody is just so stubborn and just keeps repeating the same things over and over again, each time getting more escalated. I mean, are you
Yeah.
going to repeat yourself over and over, repeating what they're repeating over and over?
No, no, and honestly, so a lot of people that have that have this any kind of experience with this, they'll tell you too that some people will kind of start to catch on to that paraphrasing, and they'll actually say, I've had people actually say in bad situations, you're just repeating everything that I'm saying. And the way to I guess combat that in a sense is actually have feeling with it, right? Actually have feeling and actually tell yourself, I am really trying to get to the bottom of this because obviously this is another human being, and if I was in their shoes, this could potentially be a bad situation for me too. But I wouldn't keep repeating it. But what I would say is, okay, now I'm having a hard time understanding it. One thing you could do is have somebody else involved. If you have that opportunity, have somebody else involved. And hey, let me get another set of ears on this or another set of eyes. But the bottom line, guys, is listening first before any action. Actually listening. Mark Twain has said something along the lines of, if we were meant to talk more than listen, we'd have two mouths and only one ear, right? So, which I think is true. I mean, we just said only 7% of our communication is words, but actually listening to them and not just repeating but paraphrasing so you understand, I think that'll help it. We have a couple of comments here. Hearing calm down makes you feel unheard. Yeah, absolutely, right. But when people want something you can't do for them, sometimes the answer really is no. 100%. That's a great statement that Stacy says. Sometimes, guys, honestly, no is. You ever hear somebody say, you got to give them a little vitamin N. That's for our parents out there. That's something that kids. When we're getting into these debates with kids, especially, there are sometimes we just have to say no, and no is a strong statement, right? And when we do say no, we got to stick by it. I mean, so there's no, once I say no, in my mind, there's very little negotiation left, right? Or if it's simply, listen, I apologize. I would love to help you. I just can't. I don't have the means to. I don't have the time to. I don't have the resources to help you. But really, if you can, if you heard that, put yourself in that position and think, what would you want from that? So what I would want is somebody to say, listen, I can't help you with this, but let me at least try to find somebody that can. And just, if you could just give me a little bit of time or just let me do that. Let me dig into this. Let me look into this. Because what that does is that could then possibly pause a situation. Because if they're continuing to repeat, and you're just paraphrasing, we're at a stalemate, right? But if I actually just tell them, okay, if we could just hit a pause, I'm going to try my best to find a solution to this. That's going to at least give that pause, give them time to actually start to de-escalate and calm down. But also us. Let's see, we have another Stacy. We're regulators, our jobs to tell people no sometimes, and they don't like hearing it. What can we do is explain the why behind their petition, but some people do not care. You're right, absolutely. I will tell you this though, just like you guys on this call and the previous calls. Um, when someone hears the why, they're open to hearing it. When someone hears the why, That's how we teach. Our whole company, when we teach, every instructor is taught also. We're not just teaching you these techniques. We're teaching you the why behind it. If you guys have noticed, everything that I've said, it's been backed up by, well, this is why that usually happens. And absolutely, though, sometimes the people just don't like the answer. And honestly, guys, there are some people that are just they want to find the negative in every single thing that's said. And for those people, what I would tell you is just do your best, do your absolute best to just maintain safety for one, and walk away from that situation saying, okay, I did everything I could for that person or for that situation, and now that's passed off to somebody else, or they're going to have to find somebody else. And you could actually end that conversation that way, that listen, everything you've told me, I'm listening, I'm trying to figure this out, but honestly, I just don't have an answer for you, and I really hope you find that answer, or I'm going to help try to find that answer. And if you can't, you can't. And that's just the truth, because what other people don't want to hear, I'm going to throw some French out there, but they don't want to be bullshitted. Don't bullshit them. Tell them the truth, but tell them with feeling. I'm sure everybody on here has heard before. Um, People don't remember the things that you did for them, but they'll always remember how you made them feel, right? So if we can understand that statement, and they may not remember that I really tried to do this, or I really tried to get somebody in that situation. However, if they walk away from that situation and they feel like, okay, that person did make me feel like they were really trying to be helpful, that's going to be huge. That's a game changer. And quite honestly, that right there, once they get that feeling, you're no longer the target, and that's what you don't want. You don't want to be the target. Um, a couple little tips with being the target is, like we talked about in the last session, don't be nameless and don't be faceless. Meaning, this is a hostage negotiator type of a tip, but you know, actually say your name. Listen, what's your name? I'm Brian. Let's start over. Okay, I'm Brian. What's your name, sir? What's your name, ma'am? Um, and obviously, if they're right off the bat, they're not giving you any information. Well, now you kind of know what direction this thing is going, right? But I'm still going to try at least not to be nameless, not be, the faceless thing is more of a hostage situation type of a thing. I want them to see my eyes. And that's the other thing, body that goes into body language. If somebody's talking to me, picture yourself at desk, or you're the one that's upset now, and you're walking into some type of an office of some sort that you feel you've been wronged, and the person is just at their computer and they're not even looking at you. Are they taking you serious? Are you feeling validated? Well, you're that person sometimes. So actually making that eye contact, getting your head up out of your phone, getting your head away from your computer. If you're behind a desk, one great thing you could do is, when I used to have my employees and my trainers come into my office, the one thing that I was taught from the very beginning is, man, move away from that desk. Even though that desk is a barrier, well, I'm not in a dire situation. I'm going to move away from the desk so there's no barrier in between us. That's a little tip to make them feel like, okay, we're on the same level now. They're actually trying to hear me now. So those are just some tips for you guys, actually. But once again, let's open this up. This is obviously how we learn. You guys have had some great questions and comments so far. Does anybody have a situation that kind of left them baffled, or left them thinking, is there something that I could have done more? How about that?
I'll share something
Yeah.
was more in a personal situation as opposed to a professional. But I remember when my ex-boyfriend and I used to fight a lot, I would be the one who wanted to talk it out and get a solution right away. He needed time and space to calm down. And I had to realize, or we had to communicate in a way that he would say, hey, I need space and I need time, but I will be back. Kind of like you said, I will get an answer. I will try to get an answer. As long as I knew that I was going to be able to revisit this, or I was going to get an answer at some point in time, maybe just not then, I felt more comfortable than him just leaving, not communicating about it, but really just knowing that I'm going to get an answer. It just might not be now, that he needed some time to calm down before reviewing what we were fighting about.
Yeah, and I'm a lot like you, James. Like I want this resolved now, right? But there are those people that they have to step away. And honestly, to me, that's always what's been taught as the right thing to step away, calm down, think about it. Um, However, there's also people like us, you and I, that we want this resolved right now, and we're almost like forcing it because we're fixers, right? So one thing about relationships, just to speak on what Jamie's talking about with when her prior relationship is once you know also how they now we're talking a little more personal now. Once you know how they operate in that sense during a debate or during a an argument, it becomes a heck of a lot easier. And we do this with our kids. We do this with, significant others, family members. We know there's certain triggers that if we say certain things, it will just trigger them. And we also know that, distance counts. If I'm moving up close, some people feel intimidated. Some people feel threatened in a sense. And which escalates, and they also a lot of times people the people that need that time, um, they're actually stepping away. Once again, let's put that into perspective for them that they're actually stepping away and they're probably trying to fix it right then. So it for us that what I've learned is when I'm trying to fix, well, that person may need some time just to process it because they are fixing it. It can't always be on my terms. Obviously in the profession that a lot of you are in right now, you're dealing with coworkers, you're dealing with clients and individuals that are coming in that you probably don't know that well. Obviously your coworkers, you're probably going to know a little bit more than a client or a customer. However, once I just know the human and us talking about this today, it's going to be a heck of a lot easier for all of us than to argue or debate in a sense, we'll call it, or communicate. So thanks, Jamie. Anybody else have I would really like to hear from somebody that maybe had a situation and how they resolved it, if we have anybody out there. And if you guys aren't talking, I think a lot of you guys are within the business that you're in, you probably not probably, you definitely have had some situations that you've had to resolve. So anybody want to share?
Stacy has
We
her
could.
hand up. If she, yeah, there you go.
Hey there.
Hi,
Um,
Stacy.
so I don't know what other departments we have represented here, but I am with Development Review Services. So a lot of our
I'm sorry, Stacy, what department is that? I missed that.
Development Review Services.
Okay.
So a lot of our customers that we deal with are property owners, contractors, but also some land developers. And so
Mhm.
there's a spectrum, but there's definitely a power dynamic at play a lot
Yeah.
of times in these conversations where sometimes these very powerful developers want something
Yeah.
standing in their way. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm just curious if you have any advice for how to build rapport, how to
Yes.
build credibility, stuff like that.
Absolute. Stacy, that's awesome. Because let me just tell you from a personal side. Um, I'm gonna get kind of personal with you guys here, and some of you are gonna listen to this and think, man, this guy is full of himself. But that is Jamie will tell you, and I think you guys that have gotten to know me now, that is absolutely not the truth. However, I do know that if if I'm working with you and we don't know each other personally, like I've worked for people before, um, that I've thought to myself, man, like if you have an ego and you're one of those people that you're talking about, I'm really hard to work with because for certain things, only because a lot of people feel in the environment that I'm in. You got to think about it. I work within a lot, we do a lot of training within training environments, gyms especially, right? So I'll get people like the gym owners a lot of times. If you have an ego, we probably we always get along, but they always feel almost threatened because a lot of times those people feel like, well, I own this. I'm the one, I'm the man, I'm the star. And if you have those types of people, they're just a little bit more difficult to work with. And the reason I say that is because, well, I don't play into that for one, and I'm going to give you all the respect in the world, which goes into what we're going to talk about, Stacy. But I know what I bring to the table, and a lot of times because I get along with quite a few people, and it's easy for me to build relationships. They kind of look at a lot of times like, oh, well, he's just a trainer and he's taking the spotlight, which I don't want to do. I just want to build good relationships because, guys, that's how I make money. So it's as simple as that, the business side of it. However, knowing that, what you're talking about, Stacy, these we'll just call them the high ego players, right? So these high ego players, what I'll do it, and this doesn't always work, but at least what it's worked decently for me is feed their ego a little bit. Be humble, but feed their ego a little bit because a lot of those types of people, they want to be heard because they want to tell you about themselves, what they've accomplished and what they've done and what they can do. And, I'll just sit there and listen and listen and listen and then feed back on that ego. Man, it sounds like you got a lot going on. You're really doing really well for yourself. And that, in a sense, once again, it validates, they still want to be validated, right? So that's one thing. But here's something else I would tell you, Stacey, because that's hard for a lot of us to hear. Man, I don't want to feed somebody else's ego, but don't look at this as a piece of the pie. Just because you're giving them a piece of the pie, it's not going to run out for everybody else. That person's probably going to be out of your life in the next 10 minutes. So feed their ego a little bit. And what you did do was hopefully you made another human being feel good. If feeling good is feeding my ego and that's what you did, well, what did we say earlier? It's not what you did for me, it's how you made me feel. So guess what they're going to do? They're typically going to come. Right. Yes. Said it feels yucky, but I definitely do it. Yeah, good, Stacy. So once I do that, they leave. And now you know who they're typically looking for when they come back? Unfortunately, sometimes they're looking for you because they want to have that feeling again, right? And the person that they get that's not feeding their ego, well, they're looking for that person that is. So a lot of those high ego players, that's usually what they need in a sense to feel validated. So I'll play their game for a little bit. If it's going to make my time a little bit easier, if it's going to make me a little bit more money, or make my day just a little bit smoother, I'll feed your ego a little bit. And quite honestly, maybe they deserve it. Maybe they don't, but I'll play your game. I'll do that. And that's one little tip that we could use. What I wouldn't do is, especially for somebody like that, is try to go fight fire with fire because as we all know, you try to fight fire with somebody that's egotistical, they're going to have that brick wall. I mean, they're not going to hear anything that you have to say. And a lot of times we know this through when we're communicating with somebody, the talkers, they just talk, 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 and they tell you all about themselves and what they did. And sometimes I think, man, this person doesn't even know my last name, like this, or this person doesn't even know what I'm about, and they'll walk away, and that's it. But those aren't the people to have, at least for me, relationships with. So, or at least personal relationships with. But Stacy, that's great. And yes, I'm sorry. That comment is absolutely right. It does feel yucky, um, but I would definitely suggest doing it because, well, if you're in the business world, that's probably how you're going to make headway. Anybody else?
I think Scott had said when an
Oh, I
issue
see that. Yeah.
when an issue has been escalated to the next level in the chain of command and the complaint doesn't get a response or the response they want, it can cause them to be more upset. How would you
Mhm.
handle that situation when it ends up back on you?
Well, that's a good question. So it's a little more specific, but and we all, man, we've all been in a situation where, well, mom says no, so I'm going to ask dad. And if dad doesn't give the direct response that I want, I'm going to go back to mom, right? And that's typically what they're doing in that sense. So you can play the role of, man, I really passed this off. I really thought that they could help you. you can do that, but obviously what you don't want to do is look like that your job or your position or your stance on this is meaningless. So what I would try to tell you, Scott, is really dig in and try to help them. And if when you say chain of command, that's a little bit different because obviously what I don't want to do, and I'm a military guy, and I can tell you, you want to really get some butts hurt. Um, Skip the chain of command. So I'm not the one to do that. I would follow that chain of command. However, there are some times that it's going to merit that. There are some times that, hey, okay, they didn't help you. So let me just get back with them personally. Let me get back with this supervisor. Let me just kind of check in with them. I'll do my due diligence for you, but I'm going to do the best that I can, but they may not change or they may not get back with you. However, if that's the case, then maybe this is the avenue that you want to do. So what did you just do? You just gave them information that could possibly help. You kind of took it off your shoulders and you still validated them, right? So if it has to do with the chain of command and you're now talking to a supervisor, I would follow up. I would follow up because now I hope your supervisor understands also that that's now falling back on you and that's something that you're dealing with. And that's how I would present it that, hey, so and so came back to me. I told them I'd help. I just, I really want to do my due diligence with the position that I have. So, can you maybe help me understand this? And now you're putting it back on their plate. So that's one way that I would handle that, Scott. That's a great question. Anybody else? So if there is nobody else, then let's just go over a quick little review just to keep it simple. Because I know each time we go over a lot of information, go a couple of different avenues, but just let's just kind of we'll paraphrase. How about that? So let's just start. Obviously, knowing positions is key. Knowing positions on a person. That's going to be key for my self-defense. It's going to be key for my personal safety. And it's also going to be key for me trying to get on their level in a sense. What am I doing with my hands? I'm not going to talk with somebody, just kind of have my hands in my pockets, especially if I don't know them. Obviously, knowing that this is possible, not probable, but I'm going to have my hands free. I'm going to make eye contact. I'm going to be looking like I'm actually paying attention to them, right? And then what I am going to do, I'm going to really try to pay attention to them. Uh, as always, guys, the biggest thing out of this is I'm going to put this into perspective and not my own perception, right? So that's key. We beat that dead horse over and over again. So understanding that is going to be huge. Also, once again, to go back to validation, spacing. Spacing. I'm going to try if I can to keep that reactionary gap, that 2 arms distance. But it's sometimes I'm going to have to close that. And if I do, because of my job or because of whatever situation I'm in, what I am going to do is at least know that that awareness flag is up. I am this close to this person. So these are the things that I'm watching for. So let's hit pause real quick. And then we're going to get back into this little bit of a review. Does anybody remember some of the pre-contact cues from Tuesday? We talked a little bit about it in the first 2 sessions, but we really touched on it on Tuesday. Does anybody remember those? What are the pre-contact cues that I'm looking for?
Being around, rubbing the back of the neck.
Yeah. Anything else? Eyes. Yeah, she says eyes, looking both ways. Yeah, you guys paid attention. All right. You guys paid more attention than Jamie does. So yes, eyes and looking both ways. So they will fidget. They're going to look both ways, whether they're looking for an exit, multiple attackers or different subjects, or just do it completely out of habit in a sense before they attack, which is a very typical response, right? Shifting weight, absolutely. They might start to shift weight. Those pre-contact cues, clenching the jaw, eyes widening, clenching fists, and one foot going slightly back or shoulder going back. So those are very important pre-contact cues to understand. So we went down this avenue just to say if those things start to happen, obviously, guys, that's my time to start creating space until they attack. And what you're going to learn in the next session is I then close the space to cut their effectiveness to then regain it. So, yes. So now let's get back on track. What about our tone? What kind of tone are we going to have with these individuals? What kind of attitude are we going to have? Even though we can, in our minds, sometimes we think, man, I've dealt with this person, I've dealt with this situation. Still at least try everything you can to have that open-minded attitude. Just that, if I was in their shoes, this is probably how I'd feel too. Or they don't know me personally, so why am I really taking this personal? That's tone and attitude. Actually listening, literally trying to listen. Um, if I'm trying to receive this message, I have to hear it, right? So if I have to hear it, well, I'm trying to process it. So really try to process what they're saying and what they're trying to convey to you. Those are the very few things that I can now start to do. And another thing that once again comes from a hostage negotiation training is low and slow. When I do paraphrase, I'm not just going to rip it right back to them. Everything's going to be low and slow. I'm going to talk a little bit lower. I'm going to talk a little bit slower for two reasons. It starts to de-escalate them slightly, and obviously they can understand what I'm saying, right? And not only that, but when I'm talking lower and slower, when I'm talking, I'm breathing. So I'm talking low and slow to take all that in. So that's something we didn't talk about, but that's huge in these kind of situations also. All right, guys. Well, we covered quite a bit of stuff. Try to keep it as simple as possible. Is there anybody now, before we start to wrap this up, that has another situation that kind of left them perplexed, or anybody that has a question, or even any kind of a situation at all that you want to get out there? This is your chance, your time.
I want to put you on the spot, Brian. Is that okay?
Absolutely do it. Hey, I get put on the spot quite a bit, and sometimes it's even on the news. So it's for everybody to hear.
Well, no
Like
news
Jamie did
here.
this morning. If you guys don't know, Jamie was on the news today by herself, representing Weapon Brand with that beautiful face and beautiful outfit. So
Aw, you're such a
go ahead,
nice
Stacy,
person.
throw it at me. I'm excited for this one. This should be good.
So I've noticed this. I've been working in government for about 10 years now, and I have noticed that many customers of various kinds don't always love hearing bad news from
Right.
women.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of, well, can I talk to your manager? It's like, well, I am the manager. And
Yeah.
sometimes they really just want to hear it from someone that they perceive as having more authority.
Sure.
Is
Well,
there,
so
yeah,
go
is there a
ahead.
way around that?
Well, this is what I can tell you. So I also worked in government for quite a long time, right? And the one thing that especially nowadays that's we are more than ever. I would say we're still not there. Whether you agree with me or not, we're still not there where we're on equal playing ground as far as males and females. But I do think that we're as close as we ever have been. Um, but I could tell you because of that, I was a military guy. I worked for the government for quite a long time, and I've seen this. I actually saw a lot of this, and even special teams. My special teams were always males, and when somebody says to me, "Well, has there ever been a female raider?" and I say no, but my mind says, "Well, they could if they went through the training and succeeded, but most people, whether it's male or female, don't." So, we all have this kind of this preconceived notion already that guys can handle things, right? But I'm going to tell you a different way to look at this also. If that's happening, the one thing, Stacy, that I could tell you is typically that's already, like we said, a preconceived notion. You're typically not going to change somebody. If somebody comes in and they want to speak to the male manager, um, whether it's female or male, they want to speak to that male manager, that person of authority. I would simply say, well, that is me. I am the person that's running this right now, and I'm going to try to help you to the best of my ability. But that's that no, right? That's giving them that no. As much as I want to say too bad, so sad. Obviously, we can't do that in government, right? So one way that you could really start to explain to them is, well, you could give it to somebody, you could give it to somebody else if you didn't want to deal with it and have to handle that kind of negativity. You could do it, but obviously you don't want to. But but B, what you could start to do is put it back on them in a sense, and just ask, well, you want a male, but let me just ask you because I'm in this position. I'm just curious because I could possibly help you, but why? Just put it right back on them because here's the thing that people don't want to say. Well, because you're a female and you're not as good as a male. They're not going to say it. And if they do say that, you're just with a complete a-hole. But regardless, if I'm telling somebody, okay, or asking somebody, just I'm trying to help you, I'm trying to understand it. Is there a reason why, or can you at least tell me what your reasoning is for this? So when you put it back on their plate, a lot of times they'll go back on it and say, oh, okay, well, can you help me? Can you picture that? So if you put it back to them, that's one way you could do it. But the other thing is, regardless of what your thoughts are, females are looked at as mother figures a lot of times, as sisters. They are looked at a lot of times as people that we have to help take care of because those are a mother is the most important job in the entire world, right? So we have that feeling. I'm going to give you a story real quick and a conversation that I had with just so you understand this perspective as well. Some people are just a-holes and they just want a male over a female just because. So put it back on them. However, let me give you this story. Um, I was talking with a friend of ours. She's a client of ours. She's a friend of ours, and her name's Monica. And Monica was retired Air Force, so she knows females can do a lot of things just as well as males and better. But when I told her about a situation that I had with a female Marine that we had, she was a Marine that she was involved in not our special operations, but still some of our combat operations. She ended up having her hand blown off. And she was just one of many Marines that had her hand blown off, or a limb, or hurt, or a casualty of some sort. However, that had more weight to it, her having her hand being taken off, than any male Marine that we had. So why is that? Like, think about that for a second. Because we look at, well, these, she's a mother. She's somebody's sister. So I'm just telling you from a male perspective, we look at that a lot of times as somebody to take care of. So if that's the case, oh, and how the story went down is, Monica started to see a different side when I said, a lot of times females have a more difficult time in those types of situations because we're looking at them. They're taking away our concentration and focus from different things because we're thinking we got to help take care of them, not because they can't do it, but because that's how a lot of us were raised. We're raised to take care of the people that well took care of us, our mothers. So that's just kind of where my head is on that. However, how you can handle that, Stacy, is use that to your advantage. Use that motherly figure, that sisterly figure. Use that as that female that, hey, okay, can you help me with this? So that's what you want, but can you help me at least? Like I just need to understand what to take to somebody or how I can help you because I am the supervisor, I am the manager, and I'm sorry, but I am a female. But can you help me with this? Because obviously a lot of those people, if they have that feeling of well, males are males and females are, they want to help the female deep down. And that's just my personal opinion. So you put me on the spot. So um, that's how I would answer that as candidly as possible. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I've noticed that, and I'm careful about the tone that I use and the words that I use and the way that I
Yeah.
deliver messaging to people when I realize that they may have some strongly held beliefs about women's
Yeah.
roles, and
Sure.
just because it's very easy to trigger an unintentional reaction out of
Sure.
people who feel a certain way. So it's
Yeah.
something to think about.
Absolutely. And I don't want to just fluff it off, but that's I'm sure as a female, any female on the call right now deals with that a ton. And um, I'm sorry for that. I mean, but there are ways in a sense that you can kind of use that to your advantage as well. That's one of those situations that, if like I said, feeding the ego of the high ego player, right? Feels yucky. We don't want to do it, but we do it to take care of business. Now, obviously, the last thing that I'll tell you is all of these things, one thing that you don't want to carry is that you lost your own integrity. So if it's important to make sure that person knows, there's two things on this. If it's important to you to make sure that that person knows that you are the one in charge, and if you're going to walk away from that, really thinking about it and dwelling on it, well, then do it. Let them know because you're the most important person. So how you feel later is the most important thing. But the other thing with that is, if I could just somehow tell myself this is temporary, it's all temporary, it's going to get better. But for right now, I'm just going to make my life a little bit easier because I am the most important. So to make my life a little bit easier, I'm going to play this game a little bit. And that's just one way to that's what we do with negotiations first place, right? We go back and forth and play the game. So that's really what it is. It's just it's unfortunate there are some people that have those beliefs and I don't think their personal opinion, I don't think they are as prevalent today as what they used to be, but they're still there. They're still definitely there. And it's you know not gotten a lot better, but it has gotten better, I feel. So we'll end that on a positive